So, Scott, you're going to lead us off with Wednesday's Guardian and cabinet carnage at the conference.
Yes, Truss's cabinet in open warfare over key policies and coup accusations. Apparently, she's managed to make a U-turn on her 45p tax and on benefit cuts as well. So the Home Secretary is accusing fellow Tory MPs of a coup against the Prime Minister. She's made some mistakes, and apparently there's some Tory MPs at the conference in Birmingham right now saying she's got less than 10 days left to prove her worth.
And this is Grant Shapps, I think, who's not an entire no-name sort of non-entity.
Well, he gets a lot of TV play because the Tory party thinks that he's a good public speaker.
Yeah.
There you go. I wish he'd fix his hair. Anyway, the point is...
He's got a dodgy history with running pyramid schemes.
Yeah, he's the Jeffrey Archer of this generation,
he is,
really.
Just not been accused
funny how
yet
the
of anything
Tories love
illegal.
all that.
But he and a few others at the conference are saying, you know, she's got to buck up and she's got to prove to us that she deserves the office. And I think a lot of people would rather Boris had not been removed in the first place. And now they feel dismayed that they have this person who seems to have never really achieved anything in her political career on the brink of making some major changes to the economy.
What do you think about that, Leo? It does feel like it's been a bit of a damp squib after all the election process that went on.
Well, yeah, 8 weeks. An 8 weeks election process was obviously far too long, and during that 8 weeks, the Tories were all fighting at each other's throats. And then, you think maybe once they've chosen a leader, it might be, maybe just for at least a couple of weeks, rally behind her and see what she does. I mean, it's worth pointing out that Thatcher also had some terrible times before she became really popular. In 1981, she had an annus horribilis, and then I think it was saved by, the Falkland War.
She's generally perceived to have been saved by the Falklands War. And the oil revenue starting to flow in at that point as well. But you're absolutely right. The Tories have usually had that knack, haven't they? That is one thing they normally do.
They did, and she had some pretty rickety economic policies came forward at the beginning of her
Thatcher.
Yes, she did, Thatcher. And that seemed unpopular, that in the end proved to be quite effective, which might be the case with this. There's an awful lot of time is spent on this 45p tax U-turn when really it just amounted to less than 2% of the economy
the whole mini budget was quite a substantial amount of money was going to have to be found from somewhere, but that particular part of it was tiny.
It was more about people hating rich people really than anything else and being jealous of their great wealth.
But what it seemed to be, what it was perceived to be, I think, was that rich people who were having it fine here already would now pay less tax and would enjoy themselves even more.
Right.
Whereas in reality, the point was to tempt people back in who would place their income elsewhere because rich people have options. They have accountants.
And they hide their income anyway. I think people move here who are wealthy for other reasons, not just money.
Yeah, that's true. But we do, in this country, we pay more tax than in Norway. So, it's insane. Norway's obviously, an incredibly high tax socialist democratic country. But, for us to be paying more taxes, we're paying the most tax we've paid in decades. I think you've got to go back to, the 1950s or something to
certainly bringing down that thing to the 40p, that was all it was under Blair. I mean, it was hardly, it's not going back to the days. I mean, but we remember when the Beatles did Taxman in the Revolver, it was 95% or something was the tax. But it's not that bad now. I did feel it was an extraordinary overreaction, and I totally agree with you. They should, for their own benefit, simply have held their ground. I'm sure these 32-point leads would have contracted again. But
it's terrible getting such a negative reaction, a review over 2% of something. It's like having a critic come to watch our show at Edinburgh for 2 minutes and then give me a 1 star, which has happened.
Yes.
And it was quite painful,
when you've got the single wrong audience member in who's being disruptive and you can't get away with it. Yeah, absolutely. I think also now what they've done is they've revealed the Tory party to be, as I think we were saying yesterday, essentially a coalition of some really quite disparate views on how to approach this coming crisis. And that's not a good look at all. That's what people don't like voting for, a house divided. Nobody votes for that.
I think the party itself is angry that Brexit hasn't been repaired and replaced or something at this point. Nothing's been done.
Nothing's been done to take advantage of it. I mean, and that would have been, of course, Boris's remit. If it hadn't been for COVID, maybe he would have managed to do something more.
Right.
Yeah, and also they do need to make public sector cuts. I mean, that was the problem with Truss's or Kwasi Kwarteng's tax cuts, was they were funded by borrowing as opposed to saying, look, we're going to cut all this stuff in the public sector. Because there's loads
Get rid of the NHS. It's not working.
Suella Braverman, well, you might as well, because you're going to have to wait for about 3 years to get treated anyway. But Suella Braverman said, she came out against benefits culture, and she's right. There are people who see it as a career, as something you can just work at and get good at claiming benefits.
But what is benefit street culture, she called it?
Oh, it's a Channel 4 or Channel 5 documentary. It was kind of lurid entertainment at the expense of people on welfare.